This podcast is presented by the Petite Victory Collective. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Modular Stories. In this podcast, I would like to create a platform for people to share themselves, their stories, their experiences, and their life lessons. My goal with this podcast is to inspire the listeners, to spark their creativity, and to share these incredible people I get to talk to with the world. My guest in this episode is Six Missing, aka Teacher Dumser. He let me use two unreleased songs of his as the background score called In Time and Underfoot. He also has a new record coming out in December and he starts releasing singles for that in September, so stay tuned. All of his socials and his website are linked down below. Enjoy the episode. Hey everybody and welcome to another episode of Modular Stories. Today I'm super excited to be joined by Six Missing or TJ Dumser, who is an incredible artist, but I don't want to give away too much. I would like to give you the chance to kind of introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Yes, I'm TJ Dumser. I perform as Six Missing, and that is my ambient meditative soundscape project. And outside of that, I'm a sound designer and mix engineer. I work in film and TV. And then I also do composition under the name Six Missing.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for this introduction. I'm super happy to have you on the podcast. I'm a huge fan of your work in ambient music. I just got into ambient music myself over like the last year, and I just love the power that it has to like totally transcend you into other worlds. And I feel that for me, your music especially, it really, really resonates with me, and it really, really touches me deeply when I listen to it. It's really, really incredible.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
No,
thank you so much.
Man.
Yeah, that's very nice of you to say. And it feels really good to hear that. Obviously, as people that create, I think when we create electronic music or ambient music, we do it so insulated and a lot of times kind of just in the studio and by ourselves. So it's really nice to know that, you know, when you put the music out into the world, that it's being heard and received, especially well, which is really great.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I had that when I was listening to your album In Other Lifetimes, where I was listening to it on a long car drive, and especially the narrative version of it, it just completely sent me into another dimension. It was really, really incredible to like listen to it, and I think it probably wasn't the best idea to do it like in the car drive because it completely sent me off.
Oh, that's really cool. So that's actually my wife's sister. She's an author.
Wow.
And so she just released a series of short stories that was published called In Other Lifetimes, All I've Lost Comes Back to Me. But ahead of that, I had reached out to her because I had just been wanting to work with other mediums, and I wanted to work with someone who was, you know, creating worlds with words, because I like to create worlds with sound. And I wanted to kind of, I think a lot of times some people don't know what to do with ambient music. They don't know how to consume it. They don't know what it really is, because there's no melody, there's no lyric. And so some people shy away from it. And what I wanted to do was kind of like work with another artist in another medium, but also show kind of how ambient music can be very versatile, and it can be an underscore to something. It can be, your soundtrack to driving or to working or to walking or exercising or relaxing. It can be all of these different things. And that, I think, is why I love creating ambient music so much. And also because it helps me when I create it. It helps me calm down. It helps me focus and center and kind of drop away all of the mental noise and anxieties that I can have running throughout my mind, and just allows me to focus in on this one thing. But yes, In Other Lifetimes was a lot of fun, and I did that. I had asked her to narrate a few pieces, and I chose that one. And I just threw it into Ableton and then started scoring underneath it. So everything was done to the
That's
narration in a sense that that's kind of how it set the pace and the flow and the ebbs and falls there. But yeah, that's really cool that you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening to it.
No, of course, man. Like, I think that's what I really love about ambient music. What you just said, that it's sometimes it's really similar to film music, because I feel like it's not really about the music itself sometimes, but it's more about like the process of transcending the people and to move people, to like bring them to like a new place in their mind. And it is also you in the studio creating the music, where you want to go into the flow and just focus on transcending in the same way that the people consuming it later will do. And yeah, I think in there for me lies kind of the beauty of ambient music, that you don't have lyrics or big melodies to kind of tell you what to feel, but it's just like it creates this world for you to kind of escape into and to free you from like troubles and worries.
You said that really beautifully, and I agree with you. And I think that's one of the things that I enjoy so much about creating that is there is no narrative to it, and it's sort of one piece can hit you differently when you hear it in different moods. Some days, if you're a little bit anxious, maybe it is going to bring you down to a center and calm. Other days, it might brighten you up and bring out something in you that you didn't really know. But I agree. When I was living in New York City, one of my favorite things to do was to just put on headphones and put on a film soundtrack, or listen to like The Social Network by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, and like listen to that on a rainy day in New York City, or just out walking, and it changes your mood, and it changes what you're bringing in and what your environment is, and it makes everything so much more interesting and cinematic. And I think that's why I gravitated towards ambient music, because I didn't start in ambient music. Not many of us do. I started doing regular, like, playing in a band and playing guitar. I'm a guitarist by nature, and I found my way into ambient music, and I never really knew much about it. So I even now I'm not super well versed in the whole ambient world. It's very vast, but it is that kind of beautiful, malleable thing that changes every time you listen to it.
Yeah, for sure. But I feel like, especially there, also ambient music is really open for that you can just mix everything together and pull all that you have together into your background. And I mean, I think you can also hear that in your music, kind of. You use guitars, you use a lot of synthesizers, but you also use strings now a lot, which is really worked well for me. And I think they're also like all the background that you have kind of makes your music in the end far more interesting and far more unique to the listener.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think as an artist, I like to keep changing and pushing myself forward, because just quite frankly, like, I get bored kind of easily. So I like to keep things kind of different and challenging for myself, so that I feel like I have to constantly kind of overcome a little hurdle or something. But yeah, I started in rock bands and folk rock and all of this, and I made my way into kind of drone and then ambient and then cinematic. And now I'm trying to take that whole journey and inject elements of it into what I'm doing now, to try to make it like my own voice. I don't want to sound like anybody else. I think that I want to put in elements of it, ingredients in it, where you could hear that, where you may not typically hear those types of instrumentation or that type of instrumentation in traditional ambient or anything like that. I don't like being in a box, really,
No, but I think that's what it's all about, and what it comes down to in the end is not being in that box, but being yourself and finding your own voice in that huge world that music is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're very, well into the film scoring world, and full well how like a film score can really change the mood of a scene. And just having the right music at the right moment and the kind of crescendo at that thing, you can really like bring somebody along for the ride, and you can kind of break down the magic trick of it all. You get lost in it. You don't see the inner workings of it. You no longer see the actors acting. You're just in the story. And I think that's something, effective film scores do that really well. They bring you along. And as somebody that myself, I work in film and TV. So a lot of times when I'm not into a story, I'm listening to what the mixer had done, and I'm trying to figure out like, oh, why didn't they do that? And it takes you right out of the story. But when you're in a story that is so well done and the music is right there along with it, you're just along for the ride. I think it is the greatest magic trick ever, and it's so cool to see that all come together.
For sure. Like, film music is a whole different beast, and it's so beautiful to have this collaboration as well for me to work with other people telling stories and just being a part of it. I sometimes feel like I struggle with storytelling in music and finding like an outlet. I like creating worlds and soundscapes and telling a story is then really hard sometimes to feel like, okay, why am I writing this? What is this for? And I feel like their film really helps me to have a motivation and in a way also an inspiration to just do something that helps another story and that doesn't have to completely tell a unique story, but it has a story to just feature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's something similar to what you just said, how I am as a musician, which I think there are writers and musicians and people that are songwriters where they wake up with a song in their head and they just have to get it out, and they just have lyrics and they have the story and they continually generate these things. I mean, storytellers like Wilco, Jeff Tweedy, Bruce Springsteen, like these people that just have decades worth of material because they just have these songs in them.
Yeah.
I have never been that type of musician. I have never woken up with the I gotta get this down type of thing. For me, it's always like sit down and see what happens. And so I think when you have the external stimuli, the external input of a film scene or a scene where you need to support this in the same way, that's why I fell in love with modular. That's why I fell in love with synthesizers. That's why I fell in love with effect pedals, because I could just turn a knob and have something completely different happen that I didn't know was going to happen. And now I'm reacting to that.
Yeah.
And now I'm able to say, oh, that's really cool. I want to continue with that. Or maybe I don't like that. Or now I want to start filling out the picture. Now I can hear the strings. Now I can hear the bass underneath it. Now I can hear where I want this to go. But I'm the same way. I need the external input in order to get the juices going. I just, I admire the people that can sit down and just write. It is a gift. I just am not blessed with that gift.
Me neither. I had the same conversation with some folks at my university who are like, well, how do you start a song? And they tell like, well, I do the strings first, I do the piano first. And I was like, nothing. Like, I just sit around and like, try out 7 different pad sounds until something sparks my creativity. But I feel the same way, and that's sometimes also really scary because I feel like I cannot really trust myself in that if I am on like a deadline or anything and I have to put something out, that sometimes it's like stressful to know that, oh, I'm not sure if my creativity will help me now, But I actually had a really nice project there in university as well, where we collaborated with dancers, and we just had an insanely quick turnaround time where we had to 201 day. Like, we got the assignment at 12 and the performance was at 6, and the performance was public. And so everybody, like the dancers, the choreographers, and us as composers, had to create like a 5 minute piece in these 4 hours, and that for every day for a week, which was insanely stressful, but it was also really, really beautiful because I really felt like I had to stop thinking and stop everything else, because sometimes I struggle with having noise or having anything distracting me from the work. And I felt like in that time pressure there, I went back into like, okay, I just have to do this now. I have to focus to get this done, you know. And there also felt like I went back to my real basics and my instincts, where I also come from rock music, and I started in rock bands too. And I actually started doing music like passionately when a friend of mine gifted me the Red Hot Chili Peppers Californication vinyl, where I was just before cool. I was like listening to David Guetta, and I just like bass and electronic music, and then he gifted me that, and I was like, that's a whole different game of music. That's incredible, like these people playing together and everything. And I realized that on that time pressure that I had during the dance project, that I fell back into writing in the style of the Chili Peppers, because that was something that I don't know why, but somehow inside of me, that was just who I was in that moment. And it was really beautiful to see that even if you don't have any ideas, there's some way to kind of get through it and to push through and get something done that is nice and that you can be proud of, even if you don't have any creative spark.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that you just said that I want to like respond to, because that's, first of all, that's so cool that they did that was an exercise like that. I think that's such a valuable skill, especially because half of the work that I do is sound mixing and sound designing for film and TV. And a lot of the times the turnaround time for those types of things are one day. So we just have, a day to get the thing done. So it really, what it does is you start to hone your skill of knowing what to spend time on, what to focus on, and what to leave behind, for lack of a better word. But I think that applies really well to music and to composition, especially. And you hone the skill of getting out of your own way, because otherwise you could sit there and tweak and write and change a patch and change a sound for days on end, and you won't get anywhere. If you just pick something and go with it, and you get out of your own way, you let your thinking mind be quiet, and you just work, everything that's inside you then has a chance to just come out unfiltered. And I think, like you were talking about, you have, that's what makes you is your unique path, your unique journey, your unique musical tastes and stylings becomes your voice. And I think that's like the beautiful thing about music. And that's why I never understand when people want to be like somebody else. It's like we already have that person. So be you. And that's why I just love that there's so much music out there, so many people creating, just specifically talking about music. That's so cool that they made you do that. And like, it really speaks to my improv brain. I really like to improvise, and it goes back to me being, getting bored easily. So when I improvise, there's just, we're constantly changing. I used to like to play shows before I left New York City. I would book a show and have some people come join me, and having never played with them before. And we would just do the performance live, just kind of saying hi before it, and then plugging in, not knowing what we were going to do, and just go in front of people. And that thrill of just being like, well, it's going to work. Like, something's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to be yet. And that type of thing is really fun. And that was like why I sort of left being in the more traditional rock music scene, is because I started to get tired of performing the same songs over and over, and kind of doing the same set and doing this is the show. And I wanted something that was going to challenge me as a musician, and doing improv live in front of people was definitely the way to do it, because you're just flying without a net at all, and it's just so fun. But it sounds like you probably had to balance a little bit of improvisation with composition and all of this together to get to that point of just turning something around in a few hours.
Yeah, for sure. It was a lot of improvisation, and then just like being, okay, this is the thing now. Just as you said, where you just have to improvise and then say, okay, now this is where we go with, this is the chords, and then do another round of improvisation onto the chords and say, okay, this is that now. But yeah, to what you said as well, like this, I heard that recently from Wolfpack, where they also talked about how they never like rehearse together, but they just go on stage and play. And I feel like there's so much magic in that, where you just get even more of the soul of the musician and the hardship of who is on stage, and you feel that even more, like 100 times more than with just playing the same songs all over, where it is really scary to do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like there's a lot of good things in there.
I love what you're saying about improvisation, and I think that makes for such interesting music and for such interesting performances. And it's, in a lot of ways, it goes back to like jazz, right?
Yeah.
And just having these themes and deviating from the theme, moving away from the theme, and then returning to the theme. But the thing I love about improv, and when bands jam like that, and you know, you have the big jam bands like Grateful Dead or Fish or something like that, is just that everybody's listening to each other. Nobody's coming with this, it doesn't work if you come to it being like, I want to do this, because everybody's mood is different, everybody's vibe is different. And that's what I love about musicians that can jam and that can play, is that if they're a good listener, then it's going to work. Yeah. It's going to work really well, because we're all feeling each other out in the moment, and that energy is just so palpable. You can really feel it when you're up there playing with other musicians. And that is the one thing I do miss about performing these days, is like performing with other people.
Yeah.
And because, when you compose, when you write, when you work, you're mostly by yourself. So it is you and the machines, you and the instruments. And sometimes I do miss the kind of like going out and being with people.
No, I totally get you. I love what you were saying about listening to each other, because I feel like that's something that is really, really important. And there, as you said, it really differentiates good bands from great bands, is if they can listen to each other, and if they also each have their own place and can put themselves step back to get the whole thing going, to put each other in their own place and say, okay, I don't need to play the whole time. Let's feature them. Let's see what's happening. And to your point about composing, exactly. I also feel the same way. Like, I'm trying sometimes still to mix the two, and to what I like to do if I get the opportunity is to just get people in this studio that I know are great improvisers and great musicians, and just let them play on a cue or on a track, and let's just see where it goes. And then having me in the mixing room and them in the booth, and just play 3 tracks, and then say, okay, I like this worked, and then going back and forth and doing it more like that than just giving them sheet. But in that, I feel like I get to capture the soul of the musicians a bit better, and I still have a bit of that jazz approach in there, where it's not jazz music at all, but there's this kind of jazzy, or also like solos, like guitar solo kind of melodies, other than just melodies that you come up with for like a chorus or something.
Yeah, I think that's so cool that you do that way. And that's my philosophy. Like, when I'm in the studio, I will not even turn on my machines until the session is open and I'm ready to record, because I know that the moment I sit down to start playing something, I'm not thinking at all. I'm not trying to make this anything other than just seeing where it's going.
Yeah.
So if I can just, if you capture that, you're great, because then the moment you start to be like, oh, I want it to be like this, it's going to be different already.
Yeah.
And you get a certain stiffness or rigidity to it, and you lose that little bit of playfulness and that fun and that adventure of while you're kind of moving to kind of figure it out. So I love that you do that. I think that's so great, and that's like the difference, between like a lifeless kind of very rigid, here's the sheet, here's the cue, versus like you allow them to add their own voice, their own flourishes to it. And something that you were also mentioning about improvising and great bands and bands that can listen, and people that are saying like it might, like when they know to step back to let somebody else shine for a moment, you're thinking about the bigger picture, you're not thinking about yourself. And when you get that kind of like group mind, that's when the real beauty comes through, because you're all working together. And I think that that's the same thing, it's not just specific to music. It's also specific. It's like in film and in TV, when you have supporting actors that recognize that they aren't the lead actor, but they're just as important to be there to help the lead actor become more authentic, more real. I think that's a hard skill, because ego and people's egos want to be really strong, and sometimes that's why a lot of bands don't work. And I know that for me in the past, that's why there's been a lot of friction in bands.
Always,
for sure.
But I totally agree, and I would even go further and say that for me at least, in that film music, or like not film music, I'm sorry, film is one of the greatest art forms there is, because not only it's the actors and the supporting actors, but it's like hundreds of departments and thousands of people working towards the bigger picture in the actual motion picture that comes out. But there's nobody that is, or in a perfect world and in a perfect film, there's nobody that's bigger than the story, and there's nobody more important than the story, and everybody else has to take a step back. So in that, I really love film if it works like that. If you have directors, producers, editors, composers, actors, and everything, set builders, everything together to just create a cohesive and beautiful story and a beautiful film in the end. And I feel there's so much magic, and especially in film, because so many different disciplines of art come together, and they all work together and have their own moments in who they are and their own skills. But it's not about their skill, it's about the thing that they all do together
in service to the story.
Exactly.
And I totally agree with you, and that's why it's honestly why I landed in mixing, sound mixing and sound design, because I have always had an appreciation for like the crew.
Yeah.
I've never, like, I've enjoyed being kind of like the lead person or out there, but I appreciate the people that are making it all happen. The director has the idea, but then the people have to actually deliver on it.
Yeah.
Like, those people are so incredible. And that's why I love being a sound mixer, because without sound, it's just pretty visuals.
Yeah.
It's like they both have to work together to tell the story. And, you'd be a lot more forgiving with poor visuals than you would with poor sound, I think, because if the story's there, it doesn't matter if you shoot it on your phone, if you shoot it on an old camcorder, or if you shoot it on a $1 million camera. If the story is good, then that's all that matters. So I love being in a role that is in service to the story, because it just elevates everything at that point. And being in film music, I'm sure you feel the same way. I mean, you could make or break a scene. It comes down to you. But if the scene isn't performed well, maybe that's where you step in more and you can save it a little bit with music or something like that. It's everything along the way working together is just incredible.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. And I would also agree that with you said that sound is there so much more important. I mean, you hear it with like Christopher Nolan's film, where everybody complains all the time about the mixing, the sound mixing. I cannot hear the dialogue. I don't know what's going on. But if they don't see it in the visuals, nobody complains. So I would totally agree with you. And I mean, you're an expert on that. You worked on pretty big things already in audio mixing. You worked on Jack Ryan, I think, and you also mixed some Super Bowl commercials even. I mean, it's awesome what you do. And I looked at some of your work on your website as well, and it's all beautiful. And again, I feel like there also comes in your affiliation with ambient music, because a lot of things you create beautiful atmospheres and beautiful worlds, and and rooms that the story can take place in and can truly develop.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I think that, to me, sound is sound. So if it's dialogue, if it's music, if it's atmospheres, it's all texture, it's all sound. And I like working with sound. Yeah. So I don't really mind what it is. And I think that having a background in music has certainly helped me be a better mixer for moving pictures. And I think working in that type of field, advertising and film and TV, has made me a better musician because I've become better at making decisions. And I think that, looping it back around to what you were saying is like, you had to make choices in that short amount of time, and it just was going to be what it's going to be, right? Like, at the end of it, you will have a piece that these dancers will work to. But working in film and advertising and TV has made me a better decision maker in music, because you just kind of have to get better at that skill. And I think that that's the most valuable skill that you could potentially develop as a composer, as a musician, working in any sort of field, is just your decision-making skills and the ability to say, like, there's something here, I should investigate it, I should go down this path a little bit with it, or this is not worth my time, we should move on and just focus elsewhere. And I think that that's, the difference between getting something done and not, releasing a song and not releasing a song, staying in your own kind of head while you try to figure it out versus put it out there and see what other people think, so that you can respond to it. That was something I did with Six Missing very early on. Was I didn't, for better or worse, maybe for worse, but I didn't think about a lot of it. I just put it out. I just continued to put things out and kind of tested it in flight. And I wanted to see what worked, what didn't work. Were people enjoying this? Do people not care about this? Is this too much? Is this too little? And you kind of just adjust on the fly as you learn new things and just as you go. And not that you asked for any piece of advice, but I guess if I were to tell somebody who was listening that was kind of getting started or has a project that they are kind of nurturing, my advice would be just put it out. Just release it. Just if it's a book you're working on, just finish it, self-publish it, don't wait. If it's a piece of music, don't wait for a label to contact you, just do it. Just put it out. Get it out there. If you want to do film scoring, reach out to directors, don't wait for them to find you. And if you're having trouble doing that, it's like, take pieces of film that are already film and put your own music to it and put it out online so people can see the type of work you do in your voice. Just get out there. Like, there's just such a great advantage now with the fact that you can really reach so many people. I mean, look at us. You're in Germany, I'm in Austin. We're speaking to each other from across the globe, and like, technology brings us all together. But I also think it just makes it so much easier for people to just find your people.
For sure. I totally agree. It's a great point. And I really love what you said about technology and about the possibility for us to just connect with everybody and to find common people. And there's so much in content out there now where you can just find people that are like you, or find people that you want to be like at some point, and you can just learn. There's so much content to learn, and there's so much to gain in everything in these days, and there's no excuse anymore, I would say, to not be improving in anything, and that's what it's all about for me, at least. Is I don't need to make great music all the time, but I want to improve on myself. I want to get better at what I do, and to just feel like I'm getting further. That is something where I always want to improve on, and where I feel like then I can say, okay, it's been good because I've learned something and I've grown.
Yeah. And I think, talking about music specifically, we're in such an exciting time, and we have been for a while, where, back in the day, if you wanted to record an orchestra or a string section or something, you had to hire those musicians to do that. And that cost a lot of time, it cost a lot of money. And you needed to, know how to work with those musicians, which is this very valuable skill for sure. But these days, I mean, you can really step into that world creating very high quality sounds for not that much money. You can, a lot of this stuff that's out there is even free to get started with. I mean, the labs type of stuff that's out there where you can download their plugin and get all of their libraries for free just to get started, just to see what your voice is like when you start experimenting with that stuff. It's a very exciting time that we're in. And I know that the artificial intelligence stuff is like all anybody wants to talk about right now, but I just think that there's going to be, we will figure out a way to coexist with it, I'm sure. But it's just, I think that's just, my overarching point is just get out there and create, just release it, put it out there, make it. Don't wait for somebody to come to you to make it. Like, believe in yourself enough to make the project.
Really well said. Yeah, I can only agree with you. It's amazing. I mean, I started out with GarageBand and nothing. Like, I just had a Mac and that was all I had for like creating the first year or something. And it was honestly so much fun to just go out there and use all the tools that were there and that were free. And I don't think I spent any money until like 1.5 years in or something, until I really felt like, I'm reaching a point now where the stuff I have is not enough anymore. So then go ahead and invest. But that took a long time to find.
Yeah. And I think that like limitation and limitations on you help you find and create your voice. So the fact that like, and in a similar way, I had started with one like digital keyboard, a Yamaha, and it had all these built-in sounds into it. And that was all I had. Like, I didn't have all of these libraries and all of this. It's like, if I wanted an organ sound, I did this. If I wanted a string sound, it was the string sound. But like the limitation that I had set on me, where like this was the thing that I was using, made me become more creative, because it's like, well, I don't want this string sound to sound exactly like the thing I did on this last thing. So how do we make it sound different? Okay, I'll plug it into a guitar amp and then mic that guitar amp. And now it sounds like something totally different. So, I think limitation breeds creativity for sure. And then also what you said about like getting to a point where you started outgrowing the tools that you had and you needed to invest and to spend time and money researching, getting new tools. That's always like, that was a piece of advice somebody gave me when I first got into modular synths. And that's what I give everybody that asks me, oh, how do I get started? What should I do? What should I get? My piece of advice to them is just get started with it and see what you find yourself needing. Yeah. And then when you come to that crossroad where you go, oh, I wish I could do this. Like, what is this that you're looking for? Then purchase that piece. Then do the research on it. Don't like get yourself into this mountain of equipment and gear that you don't maybe even necessarily need. You might find that you're just kind of using 1/10 of it or something. That's my modular synth buying advice. Start small.
For sure. I had the same thing. Like I started out and I got the VCV, like the virtual thing, where you just had everything, and I was so lost. I couldn't do anything. I didn't know what to do.
Same.
And then I actually stopped that, and I was very frustrated with modular. And then I went and bought like just a case at first. I just had the rack and a Moog Werkstatt, like this 200 euro DIY thing, where there was some things in there, and then I started exactly like you, and was like, oh, I need to control it with my Mac, so I needed an interface, and then I need to get it back in, so I need another audio interface, and then you kind of build like that. So I followed your advice without knowing, but it's great advice. I can second that.
Yeah, well, that's like, and that's so cool that you did that. I think that that's like the danger sometimes of having too many options. You have every option available to you at all times. That was what happened with me and VCV Rack as well. It was just overwhelming. I was like, I don't know what any of this is. This is just, oh my goodness. I have all of these options, and I probably just need like a couple of options. I just want to like see how to get started. And that was exactly what I did. And of course it like gets out of hand really quickly because you're like, oh, I want to be able to do this and I want to be able to do this. And with modular, there's so many options for each one of those steps along the way. But I think that that's like a valuable maybe thing to remember across the board. I feel like that's like a very, universal thing to apply kind of across the board, is to like not get too far ahead of yourself when you're getting started out. And I think that's a hard thing to do these days with social media, because you see people doing the things that you want to do and you feel like you should be at a certain level, or you should be doing something more, or you see somebody post a project or a job or a thing that they've done and you're like, man, I should be doing that. But I think it's like, it's just detrimental to your well-being to play that comparison game. Like, you really just have to be on your own path, your own journey, and don't get too far ahead of yourself. Just like stay with where you're at and do you know?
No, for sure. I feel like I think you talked about this as well in your recent live stream that you had. I watched that where you also talked about like your frustration in the summer, and that you felt you were less creative, and that social media definitely was a part in this because of exactly the reason you talked about. And I feel like that's really true. And I thought a lot about it, because on one side I feel like there's so much good things that you can learn from it, and social media can be a great platform to get to know everything that you want to know. But it's also the danger that you feel like, oh, I'm not where they are, I'm not that great, my music doesn't sound that good. But I feel like what I did and what worked for me was to try to take this just again as extra motivation, and be like, okay, I can learn from everybody, you know. Everything is like a lesson. It's like getting on the basketball field with Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant at the same time, and just seeing what they're doing, and then not get frustrated with, oh, I cannot play like them, but okay, let's see what they are doing, how they move, how they train, and get the best out of everybody that I know, and combine that into myself, and through that again learn and grow.
Mm-hmm. That's very wise of you to have that kind of takeaway from it, because I don't think that a lot of people look at it that way, as like you're describing having patience and practice and persistence, which is like, you know, full circle to what we were talking about in the beginning, is just that it takes a lot of work to get to where you want to go.
Yeah.
And, you know, somebody like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, somebody like Steve Jobs, somebody like, you know, just Stephen King, even authors, they didn't just fall into these things. Like they worked for it. They put in the time, they put in the practice, they did the studying, they did the work. And I think that how you are approaching social media is a very healthy way to look at it. But I think that is what you described as it being good and bad is why it's so tricky, because you can't just look at it at social media and say like, well, I'm just done with that. I can't do that. I can't make it fit into my life, because in a lot of ways you are closing the door to so many opportunities of inspiration. And also, you know, like we met that way. So like you get to meet all of these other like really great people doing similar things to you, and you get to talk about this stuff. But at the same time, the bad side of it is like you could put too much emphasis on it, and you could be putting too much weight on what is happening on social media. And I think that's where you have to balance it. And that's when you have to like take some time away from it, or just know when enough is enough and kind of like give yourself a pause. But I think that how you are thinking about it as inspiration and as a kind of like a beacon for something to go towards is really cool. And that is the amazing thing about it. And like, you know, you think about I thought about this the other day, where it's like in the 90s when The Matrix came out, they did that thing where it's like, he wants to learn Kung Fu, so they install Kung Fu into his head, and now he knows Kung Fu. And in a certain way, it's like we have that. We have YouTube, we have Instagram, we have, the entire internet at our disposal to learn whatever we want. In most cases, for free. It's an amazing resource that is just unbelievable. It's so cool, but it does come with, its own set of dangers, I suppose.
No, for sure. But that's also for me. Like I'm talking these big words and taking it as motivations, but I also have my moments where I'm just like, man, so frustrated with everything and feel like I'm not moving ahead and that I'm so behind everybody. So I think everybody struggles, and that's also something where social media is kind of dangerous, where you don't show the struggles. And I really like that what you did there with your live stream, where you were just sitting down and said, well, I feel down right now. I don't know exactly what to do, and I don't have energy and like creativity, so I'm going to do this now and take a break from it and talk about struggles. And I feel like this is also something really healthy and really good to do in these days, is also talk about the lows, because we often just show the highs.
Yeah, and I think that as musicians, as creative people, period, we tend to feel emotions much more extreme than most people, I think. So we're very sensitive to those highs and very sensitive to those lows as well. So it's about, figuring out how to navigate all of that. And that is why I like to talk about that with people, because exactly what you said, it is a highlight reel of positivity for the most of the time on social media. Nobody's really posting about the job they didn't get, or when they, messed this up, or they got into a fight about this. Like, people don't really share that because you don't want to show that. But I do think that it's important to show that it isn't all just positives all along the way, that it is a lot of bumps in the road as you go. And it's about, it's like don't they say that in Batman? It's about like, it's not how many times you fall, it's about how many times you get back up, or something like that. I don't know. It's the same.
Yeah. Or Rocky, wasn't it Rocky?
Either one. I'm happy to make a reference to Batman or Rocky. Both are great movies. So happy to do that. But yeah, it's important to show that. And I think that even just for myself, to tell myself like it's okay too, is important, because we are very hard on ourselves as musicians, and we want to be able to create every single day. But it's like, you have to remember, like, you do need a little bit of a break, and you do need some time to become inspired again, and to just take a breather.
Yes, for sure. I think that's beautiful closing words, I would say. I totally agree with you, and it's all I can say to that as well. I have the same feelings sometimes, but I think like realizing that is the most important step, and then everybody is a human in the end, and everybody struggles. But yeah, thank you so much. Really, I really loved our talk, and I couldn't be happier. It was really, really beautiful, and we touched on a lot of really amazing topics.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me in to speak with you, and I love what you're doing, and please just keep doing it.
Thank you. You too,
I'm
man.
excited to see. Thank you. I'm excited to see and watch all of your successes. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really, really glad I had you. Thank you so much for everything, and yeah, I hope everybody now has a chance to meet you in my audience and to check you out, because you're an incredible artist and you're doing incredible stuff. And I'm also just gonna keep enjoying what you do and keep listening to your music and getting transcended into other worlds again.
Well, thank you. And by the way, on that note, I do have a record that's going to be coming out in December. And I will be releasing some singles starting in September. So stay tuned for all of that.